what I really liked about it, Amway Stadium, if you haven't gotten the chance, anybody that's watching this episode here right now, if you want to go take a look at what that actual blueprint looks like, what the stadium looks like, it's pretty cool. And it's interesting because here in GR, it didn't really seem like we had a lot of room to build off of. It's interesting for the longest time because we just kept adding stuff on to downtown, and land mass wise, if you compare us to, take a place like Detroit, for example, I mean, you could fit three major US cities inside the city limits of Detroit itself, just how big the land mass is. So there's obviously there's a lot of space to build off of whatnot, especially with how much they're touching up a lot of the parts of the city. Here in GR, it's not really the same, but they were able to find a section of downtown, which isn't that far from Van Andel. I mean, everything's kind of right around the corner down there to where they're going to put this Amway Stadium. And the one thing I got to say, JT, and I know we talked about like great environments and stuff to call games in. I was, waxing poetic about state championships and stuff this year with high school. This venue is only going to have, I think, a seating capacity of like 6,000, which is, in my mind, which is absolutely perfect. Because what that does is get a little look at it here and exactly what they're doing. So that's kind of a zoomed out version of what's going on. But number one, I love that design of the overhang because that's going to keep a lot of the noise in, number one. And I think that's really important when you talk about the design. So there it is on the outside. So, yep, Amway Stadium, which is huge. Amway here in Grand Rapids. Let's see if we can get any other looks at it. But I love, and I don't know if you have any particular opinions on what exactly this looks or sounds like, but when you have a stadium that, only like 6,000, it's more intimate, you can really pack that thing out. And I have kind of an issue sometimes when teams make stadiums that are way too big to actually fill out, because then it doesn't really seem as big or as loud or as exciting maybe as a venue should. So I think that's the perfect size for a place like this in Grand Rapids. And the truth is this city has tried to start professional soccer teams before. They've tried to kind of get that going over at Houseman Field, which is where Grand Rapids Community College used to play their football once upon a time back in the early 2000s, and they were pretty good. But I'm excited about the outlook of it. I think the stadium's pretty sick, but I believe it's going to be the USL that is moving into that building. I'm not exactly certain. I know they haven't named a team or any of the branding or stuff like that yet, but I'm that stadium to me looks like it's going to be a cool place to go see a game.
Yeah, I think that we talk about this a lot, and maybe not so much me and you, Nathan, but I've talked about it, with a number of my friends within the soccer community. And the biggest conversation that we have, or a point in regards to like this, what's going on right now in Grand Rapids, is it too much? Right? Is there too much, soccer in this country, right? Are there too many options to go view? How can a fan base grow and be the kind of fan base that's going to allow you to kind of reach the pinnacle of your area if you're competing with 17 other things, right? And if you think about and by the way, I think this is awesome. I think a soccer specific stadium in Michigan is awesome. Obviously on Grand Rapids, they're building one here on the east side. Detroit City FC is going to call a new home here, just outside of downtown Detroit, near Mexican Village and where the train station is right now, where Ford has their new headquarters. So you love the fact that there's a soccer specific stadium here in Michigan. So I don't want to take away from that. And I think it's great that there are soccer specific stadiums popping up here in Michigan. My issue is not the stadium. My issue is the amount of teams. Or not necessarily professional teams.
Is this a soccer thing? So this is a soccer thing in general? Because I've always wondered this, and like I said, you would be, I guess, more qualified to be able to answer this question. And I know, I mean, talk about hockey. I mean, that's the same exact thing. I mean, you got juniors, you got leagues all across Canada, all across the United States. I mean, you look at NCAA Division I, and you're like, okay, in a lot of different instances, those are the best players in America, at least. I mean, I saw Minnesota play Notre Dame, and you got a couple of first rounders mixed in there. You're like, okay, when you see that level of play, you kind of understand immediately, okay, that guy's on a different level. Minnesota had a couple of those guys. Notre Dame, being a young team, they're going to get there, but they're not there quite yet. But soccer is a lot of the same way that hockey is. There's just so many leagues sprinkled across, not just the United States, but also Canada, that you start to look at everything and you're like, how does all this connect? It just seems so far spread out. So you're saying that's more of a general soccer thing, not just a Michigan based issue.
Well, I again, you go around the country, and there are teams everywhere. Not to the professional levels that you're talking about. I mean, there's not another MLS Next Pro team in
Right.
Michigan. So I'm not going to like say that is an issue, but Grand Rapids had a team. You know, they were drawing, I think, between 3 and 5,000 fans to their games back
Right.
here 3-4 years ago, and that was when they were playing. I think there was in Nisa at that time. They were not part of USL Championship. They might have been USL 2. Again, it was Grand Rapids FC, I think is what it was, right? And
Yeah.
they drew a good crowd. And I know that it wasn't necessarily about I think it was more of an ownership thing. To be fair, is kind of how that all kind of fell apart. But so hang on one.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest reasons, just to kind of try and fill in a little space here, and I'll just give my opinion as to why it maybe didn't work out. I think it actually came back to the venue itself. And I'll let you finish your point here. Houseman, which is where they were playing, which just to give you, I guess, a little background on that stadium itself, simply because my parents were born and raised here, and my dad never moved out of Grand Rapids, but he actually grew up playing high school football, believe it or not, at Houseman Field. And mind you, that was back 70s, 80s. They changed the turf, I believe, at that stadium in the late 90s, early 2000s. I don't think they've changed it ever since. Number one. Number two, I don't think the facilities were good enough to hold crowds like that. I think they have, one concession stand the way a high school team would have one concession stand. The facilities were not that great. And again, a lot of nostalgia. It's a very historical building in Grand Rapids. I think part of it might have come down to the actual venue itself. But anyways, continue with what you were saying.
Yeah, so I don't think it had anything to do with the stadium. And again, I could be wrong because these teams play in non-specific soccer stadiums. They're playing in high school, high school stadium football. That's where they play their
Right.
games.
But
And
if you want to
so
generate community interest, I mean, there's
that's not how
come
these
on, there's got to
that's
be
not how
part of
they
you that says that the venue is important
not at
to
this
some
level.
extent.
Not to this level. I don't mean that to be disingenuous to the game, but we're not playing in soccer specific stadiums. We're playing in football stadiums.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're not like again. Think of it this way, right? Could you think of it in your lifetime outside of think of any other sport for that matter, right? Hockey is played in a hockey rink, right? You can't play hockey on a non-hockey. You have to be at a hockey rink. A baseball game has to be played on a baseball field.
Right.
Now, it might be a combination baseball field, right?
Mhm.
But it has to be played on a baseball field. Football
Right.
has to be played on a football field. It's lined a specific way. Soccer, lacrosse, I don't know if there's any other, maybe rugby. Like they converge on the same field.
Yeah.
And the biggest gripe that fans across America have, if they're a fan of the game of soccer, is that they're seeing games being played on fields that have football lines.
Right.
Right. I mean, now you not at the MLS level, not at and in most USL championship fields, it's your super leagues, your top tier level soccer here in this country. That's not a thing. But when Detroit City FC first got underway, they were playing their games, I think, at Cass Tech. Then they moved to Hamtramck, and they're playing in Hamtramck now. And that field originally was a football field, and they've gone through and they've cleaned it out. They don't play football there anymore at all. That field is completely set up only for them, and they've obviously invested a ton of money and energy into that field. But that's the gripe. And if we continue this conversation about how much soccer is available, I want to put it in this perspective. Right now, and I'm just looking at Michigan. I'm not talking about other parts of the country. If we look at just Michigan for what it is, what do people want to do from May until like September in the state of Michigan? If you're not at work, if you can be someplace, where would you like to be in the warm part of the year here in Michigan? Well, warm. Thinking like if it's hot outside, where do you want to be on a Saturday?
There's a lot of different answers to that question.
Yeah, but let's just go with the most obvious, I think.
Being on the west side, obviously you got the beach. You got other things that you could fill your time with.
Yeah.
I will say, and this is just, again, from personal experience, obviously minor league baseball pulls really well. But here's my side of the coin when it comes to.
Well, you got to finish my question though. You think it's
I agree with you. I agree with you. Okay.
So
that's fair.
So and I want you to get to your point here, and I think comparing the sports is important to do as well.
Right.
Baseball has always been a summer thing. It's always been a summer thing. It's America's pastime, right? It starts in late March, early April, and goes all the way through until October, right? We know that. It's been that way forever. And my guess is that the baseball teams, minor league baseball teams, which are all part of the farm system, the Tigers, and I think we have a system here in Michigan that's part of Cleveland Indians, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm off there, but either way, you've got a farm system that draws a crowd. That's a different type of crowd. It's a different type of environment. And the reason why I say it's different is going to a minor league baseball game is different than going to a minor league soccer game. A lot of these environments, they have things that are geared towards, when the crowd, the game is in between innings, there are things that are happening within a stadium to draw people in, right? Experience, right? All those things. A soccer game is a 90-minute, you get there before the game, it starts, and there's a halftime thing where it gets kind of lull. There's none of that at most of your soccer games. And I've been to a lot of them, so I can tell you, unless you are in a 30,000 seat stadium, even then you're not like you're feeling like you're, like in that same environment. So I think those are different. But the reason I bring this up is that when you start talking about competing with the weather in Michigan, the fair weather soccer fan, if they want to, on a Friday night, want to drive up to Traverse City, or, or if you're in, North Carolina, want to, head down to the Outer Banks, or wherever it is that you want to go hang out for your weekend, that crowd is a real crowd that leaves the area and goes on their weekend getaway a couple times throughout the summer. So that's a fair weather crowd. You have your soccer fans who very much or families that want to go to soccer games, but they pick and choose because that's all they do is they go to soccer all year round. So I can tell you that the last thing that I want to do on a weekend right now is go watch a soccer game, just sitting down and watching a game. Right. So those are all the things that the local teams are competing with. That's what they're competing with. So then you take that along with the fact that there's 30 of them, right? We can just talk about the leagues here in Michigan. You've got the USL Championship, which is the top tier. There's not another MLS Next Pro is going to be the equivalent to USL Championship in Michigan. Detroit City FC, and you've got now this Grand Rapids team, West Michigan, whatever they call themselves, West Michigan something is what it's called. Anyways, I digress. So, so you've got those two teams. Then you start going a little bit below that, right? Now you start getting into, okay, there's a bunch of amateur leagues, USL League 2, right? USL League 2, that is made up of about 10 teams here in and around the state of Michigan, okay? Midwest United has a team, which is on the west side, another Grand Rapids area type team, okay? You've got Kalamazoo. They've got a team. All right. So just in Grand Rapids alone, you now have 3 teams that are all part of that environment that are going to try and draw crowds. Now, Midwest United is a youth club, right? That's how they got founded. They also have an MLS Next Academy side for both for boys. And so that that is where like a lot of your high level west side of the state talent is at right now playing soccer. They've been pretty good over the years. And so if you're a family and you want to go watch a soccer game and your child plays for Midwest United and you're paying $4,000 a year, where are you going to go watch your game? You're going to go watch your game with the Midwest United team that happens to be the feeder to where your son might go. And then, okay, so that draws that crowd. So, and then you take all the other things into account, the other lower level games, USLW. Midwest United has a USLW team. So does Kalamazoo. I believe they have a USLW. That's the women's side. Then you've got the UPSL. You've got the Midwest Premier League. We have a new thing called the League of Clubs that just kind of came out. Then you've got MPSL. You've got NPSL. I mean, you've got so many different things that a local grassroots soccer team is trying to compete with. Right. And fundamentally, it's great, right? I mean, it's great. We're grassroots. We got a crowd. We have a team, blah, blah, blah. And every team you talk to in these leagues, they all say the exact same thing. We want to be a community-based team. We want to be for the community. Well, how much of the community are you going to get when there's 30 of you?
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. If you took that same mentality of soccer with your minor league baseball teams in Grand Rapids, you don't have 6 of them. Could you imagine if you were competing with 6 other teams on the west side of the state? Like, think about that for a second. Like, and you think about this across Michigan, how many minor league baseball teams are there? You got something in Lansing, in the Lansing Lugnuts.
I mean, you do have the Muskegon Clippers. You have the
Yep.
Kalamazoo Growlers.
Traverse
you have the Battle
City,
Creek
something.
Bombers. Right.
Yep.
So you have all these Northwoods League teams. You also have Great Lakes Summer Collegiate League as well during the summer.
Well, that collegiate league is again a little different. It's kind of, I would put that probably in the same kind of ballpark as a lot of these lower level, the amateur. Again, I know that it's probably competitive from a baseball standpoint, but it's not one in which it's going to draw a ton of people to. It's just more for the players. Obviously, the battle, these ones in the stadiums, they're going to try and draw more of a crowd. But again, the competition, they're not within 10 miles of each other. They might be within 45 miles of each other.
Right.
They might be within 2 hours of each other.
So
go ahead.
Right. No. So here's I guess, and I agree with you. I do think there are too many teams for whatever it's worth. Because even I get confused when you schedule me for games and I'm looking at, okay, what are we doing? Even if it's a certain league, and I know that it's a certain league, it might be a different like tier of that league, and it might be a different division within that league. There are so many numerous teams all over the place. I'll give you my pitch as to why I think it's going to be a wild success. And it really has nothing to do
It'll
with
probably be a wild success. It probably will be.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
well, and that's so here's the thing. The first thing is location. Okay, so you are in the middle of downtown. Everything, you're right off of Bridge Street. So all the other attractions when you talk about the downtown area are all right there. And it's in a part of the city too, when you talk about the west side that is getting so young. They're starting to call it Lakertown because all the Grand Valley kids are living over in that direction. So number one, when you talk about location, especially when you talk about a new venue, you better put it in the right place. And we've seen major league organizations get screwed over on this before. Maybe they put it in a place that was popping back in the 90s and it isn't so much anymore. But the area of the city that they're putting it in, number one, when you talk about an attraction, is perfect. The other thing that I'll talk about, at least briefly, is the minor league market. So you just added the Grand Rapids Rise. It's the new professional volleyball team. Volleyball is popping off in the United States. They just added that. They added the G League team a handful of years ago. That's been doing pretty well in Grand Rapids. Obviously, you have the Griffins and you have the Whitecaps. So in terms of competition on that level, you already have competition to begin with. Now, mind you, a lot of them play in the same building, so it's a little bit of a different story. The other thing I want to just chat about, and this comes back to my experience in broadcasting minor league baseball. Take a guess. Now, we had some of the top Detroit Tigers prospects in our building this year. Max Clark is one of the biggest baseball prospects in generations. Played in West Michigan. Kevin McGonigal was in West Michigan. Tyrone Lorenzo. I mean, I could list them all off. You want to guess what our biggest, most successful day was at the ballpark?
Probably July 4th.
Close. Bluey and Bingo night. Do
Oh,
you know who Bluey and Bingo are, Jonathan Turner?
I do not. I do not. I do
It
not.
is an Australian cartoon.
Oh,
I think
well,
they're Australian.
to each
It's
their
little
own.
kids love it. Yes. So to my point, I think sometimes the conversation isn't necessarily so much about the game itself, because I'm going to tell you this, the majority of the fans that we get in West Michigan are not baseball fans. They're not there to consume Tigers prospects. They're not there to actually watch. Now, we do have a
No,
lot
they're
of them.
looking for
Don't get
something
me
fun to
wrong.
do with their families, and I don't disagree
Yes,
with you on that. And that's
it's
why I'm
about
saying that
the
the baseball environment,
experience.
though, is completely different than a soccer environment. And again,
I
if
get
you've
it.
ever been to a Detroit City FC game, which I would tell anyone to go to, it is the most incredible experience that you will ever go to. And
Right.
it's loud, it's chaotic, it's controversial. I mean,
Yeah.
and so I would say if you're going to go taking your kids, just understand that they're going to hear a bunch of language that they shouldn't want to hear. But
Same with the Cubs
but
game.
it's an experience. I'm not
Right.
disagreeing with you that there's an experience that, again, it's something to do on a Friday and Saturday night or Sunday afternoon, right? In the summer months. And obviously, this is one of those things. And with like the G League and other minor league teams on the west side of the state here in Michigan, obviously, the winter time specifically, we know that there's a lot less things to do. So when you start to have multiple things that are happening in an arena night after night after night, it just creates an opportunity for people to go and do something that they want to do that can be enjoyable. So I don't disagree with you on that. And my perspective on this, and I've had this conversation with Alexi Lawless. Are we diluting ourselves? And his point was, no, I don't think we are. I think the game of soccer, the more you have, the better it is for everybody involved. And I don't know if I come from the same school of thought in regards to more is better. I think I come from the school of thought that, the best players, the ones that are the top 3, 4, 5% of players in the country. Top 1% already play at the highest level, right? We know that, right? They play in the MLS. The other, 2, 3, 4, 5% of the population that is played at a high level, that are playing in the USL League Twos and the championships that are right below the MLS. They're going to try and find their way to the best teams, right? And when you have so many teams to pick from, what team is the best, right? I think USL League 2 has 140 teams in it nationwide.
Hmm.
USLW, I think it's around 70 teams. The UPSL, which is the largest men's amateur league in the country, has somewhere around 400 teams nationwide. The Midwest Premier League now has somewhere in the neighborhood of, I think, 40, maybe 50 teams. The League of Clubs, which is a brand new league, has 40 or 50 teams that will be out this year. The WPSL, which is the Women's Premier Soccer League, that has another 140 teams. You have just a lot of selection. Here in Michigan, we probably have 20 or 30 teams that play at a lower level. And I
Wouldn't
just
you
my
agree?
go ahead.
Wouldn't you agree though that the cream always rises to the top though, regardless? In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of and I hate the fact that this exists, and I feel bad watching these kids and specifically their parents who buy into this idea that some scout plopped in their head that, oh, your kid's good enough to go play at LSU someday. No, he's not. Unfortunately, you're just paying absorbent amount of money for him to go travel around and not do that well, and then eventually flame out. And I'm not going to point out anybody, but that is something that exists at least in the baseball world. I mean,
Well, it
but
exists. It exists
eventually
in
the cream's going
general.
to rise to the top,
Yes,
regardless.
but here's the thing, right? And this is the thing. The churn rate, in the UPSL, I think the lifetime of a team is less than 5 years, right? So
Hmm.
I come in as the UPSL. I come in as one of these leagues, and I'm like, hey, come join our league. Bring your team to our league. Okay. To enter these leagues, you're paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 upwards of $5,000 just to enter into the league itself. USL League Two is even more than that. You're talking about paying $50,000 to $75,000 of an entrance fee just to get in the league. Okay, so now you're committed. Now you're in this thing, right? Because you just spent 75 grand to get into it, and then you got to pay an annual, whatever. And there's a whole bunch of things that are associated with game day experience. There are requirements that these leagues and mandates these leagues put on these teams that if you are not fully funded and capitalized, you aren't going to be around in 5 years. And obviously, the USL League Two doesn't want to bring teams in that don't have the capital. So that might be a league that's probably more selective than the next because it's also a higher dollar amount, right? There's more value. That league is run like a professional league. The USL League Two does a fantastic job with its organization, how it runs everything. It is one of the premier leagues in this country. And I will stand by that because I've had a chance to work, very closely with USL League Two within regards to our relationship with the Flint City Bucks and Union FC Macomb. So we know this league. And I've worked with the UPSL, and while they have their nuances, they are another good league. And every league is run differently based on who's at the top. But again, if we're talking about longevity, if we're talking about community, if the battle is just staying alive, right? That's the problem, right? Well, we're going to be here in 5 years,
Right.
I mean that to me that's because again,
Right.
like there's a team that
Which
just
is
came up here
why
last.
yeah.
Go ahead.
That's the only thing, which is why markets matter. I would argue there are some teams in some places that will not turn a profit simply because of where they are. So is that more on the league for not vetting the fact that there's probably a team that's not going to turn a profit, or are they just kind of more interested in what the dollar amount is up front in order to get them into the league? Because I do see a problem with that. And I'd agree. I mean, that's you can't. The fact that teams are only lasting 5 years and then they're out leads to a level of instability that it's really hard for people to get behind. If you don't have something that's set in stone and runs like a well-oiled machine, it's tough to, familiarity is a big thing that continues to draw people in. If they're familiar with who the teams are and where they play and who the players are and what to expect and, what leagues to watch and what teams, then you're going to generate a lot more interest. But the fact that you don't have that, at least in some of these leagues, I get that that's problematic. So do you think that's more on the teams for not generating a profit, or do you think that's more on the league for just kind of willy-nilly adding new teams here or there from year to year?
Yeah, so it's a two-pronged thing, right? So I would argue to say that, and I don't know if this is, I don't know how accurate this is. I just tried Googling it, and
Yeah.
Google did not give me back an answer, but at least one that I was happy with. So I'm gonna wait for. We'll get back to that. But
Yeah.
okay, so I remember hearing that most MLS teams are not profitable, that they lose money. I know that Detroit City,
Yeah.
which is in championship, is losing money every year. Right, they're not making money, and they draw in 7,000 people to most of their games. Right, so you think about that. An average ticket cost of $15, $10 a ticket, whatever it is. You're looking at $70,000 to $80,000 per home game. And that doesn't count food, doesn't count anything else, doesn't count their ad dollars that come in. And that's just an average of $10 a game. If it was 20, obviously you could do the math on that. Most of these teams are not profitable. That's even at the highest levels in this country. They're not profitable. They bring in revenue, but they're not making money. They're losing money every year. Your local teams. I mean, just put things in perspective. I don't have a pad. I mean, I have a pad of paper in front of me, but for those of you at home who are listening in on this or watching us this morning, take a pen and paper and write this down. Field costs. What's it cost to rent a field in the state of Michigan right now? To rent a field by the hour is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about at least $100 an hour. Okay. So you think about on a game day, right? And the average team is going to have between 5 and 10 home games a season. So the average game rental is probably 3 hours on the minimum side. I would say more like 5 hours. So your field cost to rent a field just for one game is going to be somewhere between $300 and $500. Okay. So we'll go on the lower end, $300. So take that by 10 home games. That's $3,000 just to rent fields. Okay. Now you need to practice someplace, right? So you have to practice. unless you're practicing, in a park that, is no one cares about, you're paying a fee. We'll just add another $100 an hour again. So most teams are going to train probably, I would say most are going to train probably at least 2 times a week. So $400 a week times that by 8 to 10 weeks in a summer, another $4,000. So you are $7,000 in the hole just on field costs alone. You haven't even, looked at uniform costs. You haven't looked at your referee costs, $100 a game. And that's for every game, by the way. So it's $100 a game times however many 20 games. That's $2,000. Uniform costs are going to be at least $150 to $300 a person. So you take that and multiply that by 25 people on your roster. Do the math on that, right? You then have, I don't know, you gotta have a trainer. Most of these amateur leagues require you to have a trainer on site. So that's another, unless you have a really bad trainer, you're going to be paying at least $200 a game. So these costs add up. You're talking about $30,000 a summer to operate a team. $30,000. And we're talking about like teams like that are made up of like me and you, Nathan. Like average Joes who want to keep playing. Yeah, we played competitively in high school. We played some college soccer. We still have it. We're still pretty good. We're not making gazillions of dollars. We make or whatever. And the players in some cases are even getting paid by the team to be there because it's a competitive world. And if I'm leaving my job to come play for you, I need to get compensated. So we're going to pay you to go. We haven't even talked about travel costs. Let's just say, for example, west side of the state, it's 3 hours away from the east side. Most of the teams that are in the state are on the east side, not on the west side. So you're traveling 3 hours on a Sunday to come here, right? Are you staying in a hotel? Are you hopping on a bus? Like, how does that work? I think that the operating budget of like the Flint City Bucks is somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $100,000 a summer to $150,000. That's a USL League 2 team, plays up in Flint. That's maybe their operating budget. Like, think about that. So it's like it's so expensive, and that's like $30,000 is probably the average for these lower level teams across the state. That's a lot of money that's pouring out of these teams. And where is that money coming from? Local sponsors, local little small businesses. Like, I remember walking into like local businesses when I was playing softball and saying, "Hey, would you like to be our uniform sponsor and get a couple $100?" And the only requirement was we had to come in after the game, and like sign a log and have food there. That was our requirement. But
so I guess the question is it seems like, at least from what you're describing, it seems like the Wild West. It seems like that there's not a whole lot of organization to any of this. And that's, I guess, in a way that kind of works out for us. It's interesting because I've always chatted about this, even with family members who are a little surprised as to what I'm doing right now. They're like, "Oh, soccer." I'm like, "Yeah, turns out there are 8 billion teams out there, which means it seems like there's unlimited demand, which means that there's going to be a lot of jobs and a lot of work to be done." But at the same exact time, even in the middle of doing this, I'm like, it is the wild, wild west out here. Why doesn't the MLS or some professional league in the United States at least try to create some sort of model that maybe like resembles baseball, where you have minor league farm teams? Or has anyone really ever tried to step in and try to organize all of this in one way or another that somehow makes sense? Because
it's governed by U.S. Soccer, and and obviously,
because I know there's tiers.
Oh yeah, there's definitely tiers, and most of the leagues kind of fall into that third and fourth tier here in like the amateur tiers. But the Wild Wild West is probably not the best way to describe it. All these leagues they have commissioners and things like that. But if we look at it from the perspective that I'll take Troy United. They're a team that popped up here in the last couple of years. They play in the Midwest Premier League. They started off playing in like the MPSL, which is the Michigan Premier Soccer League. It's the place where most amateur teams find their way when they want to just keep playing, right? They want to be competitive, but they don't want to invest the same kind of investment that you might get from playing in these other leagues. So they pay a smaller, like $200 or $300 registration fee, and they play 10 games a spring and 10 games a summer, and it might cost them 10 grand a summer, not 30, right? That's a different layer. And they popped up, and they're located here in Troy, and I don't know about their game day experience. I really haven't been to a ton of their games. So I think we've called one in their history. And they're based here in Troy, and they have a lot of local people kind of in the mix, kind of helping as far as like advertising and things like that. And will they be here in a number of years? I don't know the answer to that question. I've seen enough of these teams that come in and they pop out because of funding, and it's not so much the funding too, right? Operating these teams is like a full-time job. I mean, as a former high school soccer coach, I can tell you that. I mean, I had a full-time job, but then I was working 40 hours a week as a coach. So I was working another full-time job, and to run these teams, the trainings and organizing everything, game day experience, all these things that you're trying to kind of navigate, it becomes a full-time job. And the people, even with the best intentions and the most passion, are going to lose their gusto. They're going to lose that because they're overworked and they're underpaid, and someone's going to come up to their wife, their spouse, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, whatever, is going to be like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing this for? I love the game. Great. You love the game.
And trying to create that game day experience or something that people actually want to come out and consume. Is that what you're talking about?
It's all of it, man. It's all of it. The amount of time it takes to do all this, it's not like you can just like show up and just put on some boots. That's what the MPSL is for. You can just show up, but in most cases, in these other leagues, in the Midwest Premier League and UPSL, there are game day requirements that are required of you. You registering players and making sure that that's all good. Again, getting to the field on time and making sure that everything is set up, making sure your trainer's there. I mean, games can't even take place unless there's a trainer on site. Right. So there's so many things that have to happen. And if you have to have interns, got to have interns, so who are you going to go find? You got to go find a bunch of kids to help you. And guess what? You're only as good as your weakest link. I'm a firm believer in that. Right. If you don't have enough people to help you, you're running around doing a whole bunch of stuff on your own. It is a process, Nathan. And it's one of those things where
I think it's possible, though, if you have a well-oiled organization. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're describing to me, and again, I don't know, I'm not as familiar with the soccer world. You gotta realize a lot of this is me learning on the fly. I mean, I'm trying to obviously give my opinions, but you know a little bit more about setting that stuff up. But I guess in my mind, I don't see that big of a difference between that and the soccer realm, and being able to manage all that in the baseball realm. It's especially when you talk about, with major league regulations and the Tigers and what they need and player development and all that other stuff.
Here's the thing, right? This is the biggest difference. Again, I can't speak to some of the lower level minor league teams, but if you are part of the AAA, the AA, the single A system, if you're part of that, you're getting feeder money is coming in from the big league teams. They are there to support you.
That's fair,
right? There's no support,
especially for renovations and stuff.
There's no support. Like there's none. Like I would imagine that, like the West Side, the different minor league teams, the coaches being hired by the big league club, they're being hired by that club. There's no support system. Like again, if your team is Detroit City FC, there's nobody above you who's going, here you go, and there's nobody, and you might be doing the same things below you. Right. But there's no support system. So you are 100% on your own and your ownership group or whoever's in charge. So that is the single difference and the greatest difference, to be fair, because your team isn't going to fail because the club isn't going to allow it to fail. It's not going to allow it to fail. Now, it might not have a great season. It might whatever. But as long as it's a part of the farm system of the Detroit Tigers, the Tigers will never allow that thing to take a shit. You know what I mean? They won't. But what's stopping the West Michigan whatever from taking a crap.
Right.
So and that's the thing.
And to take you back, it did, but the thing is, it didn't always used to be that way. Now Major League Baseball has oversight. Now they do. And
Yeah.
obviously, since the minor league realignment, there's a lot less teams. So it's a lot easier to handle. You don't have as many players on rosters anymore. The draft is only half as big as what it used to be. Like, they have taken steps in the direction of trying to trim a lot of the fat in that regard. But take you back a couple of decades, it didn't used to be that way. It used to be a lot like what soccer is now. I think you might have had one level of the minor leagues, but outside of that, you had all of these independent leagues sprawling across the United States. And so you just kind of had to do your best to just find this guy from this league, or scouting was a lot different, and in the world of baseball was a lot different. But then eventually it all came together, and now Major League Baseball has oversight over minor league baseball, and there's a very clear dividing line between you either play affiliated ball or you don't play affiliated ball. Like, there's not this question of like, well, you're at this league here and this, that, and the other thing. So like, my other question is, if you have a Columbus Crew UPSL team, are they not considered affiliated with the Columbus Crew at all?
Well, again, that's so obviously there are teams within these different leagues that do operate under the umbrella of a larger organization, right? And so that umbrella is different, but than let's say other teams. So that, yes, there are probably a couple dozen teams that are part of the MLS academy system that are playing in different leagues at the amateur level around the country, and obviously that would be a different scenario, but that is not the norm. That is that is the anomaly, right, in this thing. I want to make it clear, I'm not against lower level teams popping up, but this idea of we're going to rally our community around our team, you can do a lot more. You can do a lot, have a much more of an impact not starting a team for your community, getting involved in the community, than starting a team. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, if the goal, because everywhere I go, oh yeah, we're gonna be a team for our community. Well, okay. I mean, what does that even mean? The community's got to show up. It might take years for that
I
to
think they
happen.
will.
Yeah, but when you talk about, okay, well, what does that mean? Okay, I'll give you a perfect example of this. Okay, Oak University, men's basketball, women's basketball. I'm going to use just the basketball teams here locally. Oak University went to the NCAA tournament last year. They beat Kentucky, right? And they went on, and they almost won their second game, right? It was pretty damn close. They had it was an off night for them. They were pretty damn close just to winning that game. You would think that the amount of attention that team got last year and what they did would turn into an opportunity for them to see much larger crowds at their games this year, right? You would think that would somehow transcend, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
didn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about here in Metro Detroit too, think about college basketball. I can't speak to your side of the state, but in Division I college basketball, where we are located, there are only two teams in the Division I realm within 20 miles of each other here on the east side of Michigan. That is University of Detroit Mercy, the
Mm-hmm.
Titans, and Oak University. There's no other Division I, like, Wayne State's Division II. I think they're Division II. So, like, and then you've obviously, if you want to go further to the west, you can go to Michigan, you can go to Eastern, there's other Division I. You want to go across the border to Ohio, you got Toledo, right? Bowling Green. Like, there are other teams within, and schools, but there's only two. And you think about, okay, well, powerhouse type basketball programs in Michigan, they're located where? Detroit, right? You look at like Cass Tech and these type, Orchard Lake St. Mary's, which I think is Division I. They're all within the, where are they at? Why aren't they participating and being a part of these? The Rochester School District has, I think, one of the largest school districts in Michigan. They've got 3 high school basketball teams, both in girls and boys. They're not showing up to those games. Why not? Why aren't they showing up? Why aren't they
Mm,
there on a Saturday afternoon to watch a basketball game?
mhm.
And it's again, the sports environment has changed. We know that. We know that, to be fair, I would as much as I want to go to watch a Lions game in person right now, first and foremost, I don't want to pay the price tag. Number two, I don't know if even after paying the price tag, I want to sit in an environment where I'm going to get beer spilled on me or a fight might break out. I mean, I don't know if I want to be in that environment. To be fair, I'd rather be sitting on my couch with my drink, watching on my big screen, and not having
You and
all
me
that
both.
chaos around me, right? And that
But
might
some
make me
people,
that's obviously not, it's not for
right,
everybody, but that's kind of where my mindset's at. Now, granted, when I was
right,
20 years old, yeah, let's get in there. Let's get into some fights. Yeah. But now I don't want anything to do with that.
right,
And I think that a lot of people don't want to necessarily leave their home. They want to, if they want to watch something, they can do it on their phone. They can do it, on their TV or whatever. So I think that might be a factor as well. But if you're trying to start a team and you're thinking about doing it for your community, it's just like I would tell businesses when I was selling advertising to them. I would look at their ads every year, Nathan, and there would be like an American flag and God bless America, and I'd be like, Mr. Customer, yeah, of course, God bless America. But unless God is paying for your ad, you need to tell people why they should do business with you. And while being a godly business is important, and it is, I don't know if it needs to be the biggest staple of your ad. You know what I mean? Like
right,
the biggest focal point. You need to tell. There's need to be a reason as to why someone should come and do business with you, and that could be one reason, and that could be a very big reason. But at the end of the day, you're paying for ad space, so use it to your advantage to get you the most bang for your buck.
right,
And if you're a community based team, that's fine, but you don't have to be in the best league or the most expensive league or have the most expensive whatever in that league. If the goal is to be a community based team, you can still do
right.
all that without having to go to these grandiose ideas because
I mean,
it,
the one thing I will say is I think Amway is capable of doing that with the amount of money Amway has. So first and foremost, but the other thing is it's the whole community aspect. It's also because they're not just going to play soccer there. It is also going to be an outdoor venue. And with the amount of stuff, and you talked about going on in the city during the summertime, and it only continues to be more and more, there's going to be a lot of other things that go on in that building outside of
well, that
just
building is
soccer. And it
that team will
right,
be fine because again,
right,
it's MLS Next Pro. There's not another MLS Next Pro team in Michigan, not
right,
yet.
right.
I don't dispute
But
that they'll be good, and I don't
yeah,
dispute that they'll be okay.
right,
My thing is it lends to this conversation about how much is too much, and that's how
right.
much is too much. How many
No,
soccer
it's
teams
fair.
should we
Like,
have?
but
Should we
it's
have
tough to
400 teams in Michigan? I mean, like
it's tough to have that question when you talk about a city that continues to add new teams that is having success with those teams. So that's the only thing. And again, I talked about location. The other thing is I know we've talked about results, winning games, being successful. If the Whitecaps came out next year and I was actually there in 2019, I think they had the worst record in all of professional baseball,
nice.
regardless of level. They still sold out. They still had 7, 8, 9,000 crowd. And I realize, and I understand because of the way that the baseball is structured and the innings and everything like that. There's on-field stuff you can do. I mean, heck, we got the Savannah Bananas right now. I mean, we just got they're looking for new broadcast entertainers. Like they got a whole crew of them, and it's just a walking, moving show. That's
Well,
all
and
it is.
and
That's
and I
why they
think I
sell
think
out these major league
we're gonna
stadiums.
see
It's huge.
this big league pop
Right.
up as a result of that, and obviously that's gonna
Right.
be great for baseball as a whole. But
Yeah.
but
Is
but
there
Nathan, I
any
don't.
way of soccer being able to break that traditional mold of what a soccer game looks like, though, and have a product that is entertaining that people want to come to regardless of the game itself, whether that be promotions, whether that be something else within the organization, though? That's my question because baseball had a big issue with this. Well, this is just the way we do it. This is how a baseball game should look and sound and feel. And then they broke that mold. And now minor league baseball is still very much alive and well. Baseball is not a popular sport. Okay, let me just put this out there. Baseball is not popping off the
It's
way that
still
it
top
was
4
back
in this
when our
country,
our
though.
parents were kids. But with the way that they handle the game, especially at the minor league level, and the way that they're able to bring people out with whatever it is that they're doing, that's why the game has been able to survive and advance in this modern culture of, you're right, phones and TVs and really just not wanting to go to crowded places. I'm with you on that. But does soccer have something that they can do, or an organization like this that will make a difference in that regard?
I think when it comes to the experience, I think that there's many things that teams can do or clubs can do to enhance the overall guest experience, the fan experience, and those can all happen in many different ways. My thing is, and I asked this question, is how much is too much? And I
That's
think
fair.
I think we're damn close. I think
Yeah.
we're damn close because, again, this isn't like if you just build it, they will come, right? That's not how this works. And if push comes to shove, if you're asking me, if you live on the east side, not the west side's different. You don't have a Tigers game. You don't
Nope.
have the Comerica Park. You don't have
Nope.
Ford Field. You don't have,
Yep.
Little Caesars Arena. You have your variation of that, right? So, but if Grand Rapids, you took your teams,
Mm-hmm.
or you took your team and put them 2.5 hours closer, to where in Metro Detroit, I'm telling you this right now, those stadiums would not be anywhere close to being filled. Why? Because the fan would be okay. The choice comes to spend the $150 to $200 on a Friday night. Where are you going to spend it? You're going to spend it going to the premier game. I've said this. If an MLS team came to Metro Detroit, an MLS team, and Detroit City FC was not the team, they would suffer in their attendance. And not because they don't have a good fan base. They do. But if you're going to sit here and tell me that on a Saturday afternoon, you've got an MLS team game happening in downtown Detroit at the exact same time as USL Championship game, you're telling me that your fan base is going to just be sitting there watching that game? I'm going to say, no, they're not. Not
Right.
entirely. So you're going to go from 7,000 fans to 5,000
Right.
fans, maybe even to 4,000 fans.
Isn't
It
that
might be
isn't that
worse than
why?
that.
Yeah, isn't that why it matters though? Because I don't really see a lot of these other smaller leagues in West Michigan taking away from the attendance, especially with where the stadium is going to be. I mean,
No, it won't matter for you guys. Again, I mean,
yeah,
like you have some things that conflict, but again, I mean, you can pick and choose. There's like 60 baseball games a summer, so you just don't
right,
go to those three. You go to the you pick your battle. Um,
right,
and again, it's a different experience. But you're talking about consistency, right? If we talk about
right,
consistency, right? If you look at a Lions game. And honestly, for the longest time, even when they were terrible, they still drew well over 50% into their stadium. You know what I mean? So
right,
why? Because people love
right,
football, right? So what the key will be is what happens after that stadium opens, right? So after it opens and they go through their first 3 or 4 games, what happens then? Does it turn into, hey, do we still draw 8,500 people every week? Or does it start go to 6,000, 5,000, and 3,000, right? And then you start looking a little more empty. Time will tell what will happen there.
right.
My gut tells me season 1 will probably be pretty good, and we'll have to see what season 2 does. But it's just I'm fearful. I'm just fearful with the amount of soccer that is available now at these levels and where it will go. And are we setting ourselves up for a massive drop off
Right.
because teams just don't have the money to support themselves anymore? And to be fair, they rely heavily on local businesses. And are those local businesses really getting any value out
Right.
of being a part of that game or that team? And I would
You think
argue
there's a
that
trickle down aspect to it? I mean, once the highest leagues start making more money than everybody else is going to kind of make that along with them, because I
if
do
you
think
are a
maybe
local
we're spread too
business,
thin.
if you are a
Yeah.
local business, okay, and obviously you have to look at this from the standpoint of who has the most money, right? So demographically, most of your money are in with people who are in their late 20s to mid 40s and upwards of 60, right? You start talking about where most of this money is at, and depending upon what type of business you have, right? So if you're like a doctor's office or you're a pediatrician, where are you going to advertise? You're going to advertise where moms and dads are going to be. And where are moms and dads? They're with their kids. And where are their kids? Their kids are playing youth sports. So if you are a pediatrician, it makes more sense for you to advertise with, the quote unquote club soccer team, club basketball team, than to go support the men's team. Right now, if you are a doctor, you might want to go like a doctor, an orthopedic surgeon. You might want to go advertise with that. But again, look at your bang for buck. I mean, bang for buck is chances are if you're an adult, and you break your bone, you might not go through the same levels of trying to take care of that as maybe the 13-year-old whose parents make that choice for them. Right. So again, I think, and I think I just know that the better market for an advertiser is in the youth game because you can get everybody. Right. So, again, it all depends. I think it's a great conversation nonetheless. And obviously we spent the entire show talking about it. That's the beauty of this, is that we can talk about this kind of stuff, and we'll have more conversations like this, Nathan, where we can kind of dive into like this aspect of the game, because it's a part of the game that I know that anyone who's listening or watching this, and again, if you're watching us, it's on YouTube and Roku. If you're listening to us, it's on Spotify and Apple and wherever else you want to listen to podcasts. But, the reality is that the game of soccer is beautiful in all aspects of it. And even when even when you're talking about the things like this that maybe aren't necessarily the pretty side of the game, so to speak, the administrative side of the game, which we haven't gotten to politics. That's a whole nother level. Politics of sport, politics of soccer. That's a whole nother layer that we'll peel back here in coming episodes. It can get you it can get kind of nutty. So, but either way, that's Tuesday, man. That's a wrap on episode number 2. Any final thoughts here before we skedoodle?
No, I'm like I said, I'm just excited about it. I've been seeing the news. I've been wanting to chat about it on an open platform, and obviously we have the platform to do that. But I'm just excited for another minor league team to be in Grand Rapids, for it to be right downtown. I mean, it's in a dynamite location, and be honest with you, selfishly, I hope I can get into that press box once it finally does open. So I'm a big, obviously, Grand Rapids community guy. I would like to get the hell out of here eventually, but
wow,
for now, being born and raised here, I'm Michigan through and through. So I'm excited about them coming. Just wanted to chat with you about it, and I think it'll be a success. But you're right, only time will tell. And I do think soccer needs to figure it out in a way, and figure out how to kind of make all this a little bit more unison and a little bit more realistic, because it does kind of seem like we're spread a little bit thin, but it should be perfect. I'm excited for it.
Me too. That's a wrap here on episode number 2. Don't forget, subscribe, like us, and share us on all your social media platforms, and check us out on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Until next time, so long, everybody.